Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Planning and Development Committee meeting. It's Monday, May 13th, 2013. It's just about 8 o'clock in the evening, and thank you all for coming tonight. We've got several items on our agenda. The first one is we do have a quorum. Second is approval of the meeting minutes of April 22nd, 2013.
Approval.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or any changes? Okay. Then we're going to items to for consideration. First one is P1, approval of sidewalk cafe for JT's Bar and Grill, 1639 Orrington Avenue. Staff recommends approval of a first-time application for a sidewalk cafe permit for JT's Bar and Grill, a Type 1 restaurant located at 1639 Orrington Avenue, and that is for action tonight.
Move approval.
Okay, we have one person who has signed up to speak on that. Looks like Stella? I'm not sure. Is there anyone here who wanted to speak on that? Okay. I'm sorry, was there a motion?
Moved.
Okay, all right, it was moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? All righty. Second, P2 is approval of a sidewalk cafe for World of Beer, 1601 Sherman Avenue. Staff recommends approval of a first-time application for a sidewalk cafe permit for World of Beer, a Type 1 restaurant located at 1601 Sherman Avenue. That is for action.
Move approval. Second.
Okay, we have one person signed up to speak on that, actually two people. Ted Mavrakis, are you here? Or Ted? I'm sorry, Ted. Okay, I'm sorry, Ted.
I signed up just in case there were any questions.
Oh, okay. And then MF Ruiz at 1580 Sherman. Are you here tonight? Okay. Are there any questions on behalf of the committee? Okay, I guess the only question, I'm sorry.
We might have a speaker.
Okay, we do have a speaker, okay. Ms. Ruiz? Okay. If you would just state your name and your address.
Yes, Marilyn Fackless Ruiz, 1580 Sherman Avenue, number 506, Evanston, 60201. Is that it?
That's it.
Okay. Well, good evening, council members, staff, and residents. The reason that I'm here is basically for the P2 request for action, and I apologize. I am a little unprepared. I just flew in from Arizona last night, so I'm sorry. I live across the street from Fountain Square. And one of the issues I had was basically the outdoor cafe. There are three entrances to the World of Beers. There's one on Sherman, there's one on Orrington, and there is one directly in front of Fountain Square facing south. The entrances on Orrington and Sherman Avenue both say, please use other door, and are locked. The entrance which is used is the one directly in front of Fountain Square. There is smoking by the clients of World of Beers directly in front of Fountain Square, and basically use by basically the clients sitting on some of the Fountain Square areas. I don't have a problem with that during the winter, but during the summer, that is going to be used by toddlers, mature people, skateboarders, Northwestern students, and basically everyone else. It's a wonderful area. It's a place for Evanston. I'm concerned about the population for World of Beers being out there and smoking. They need to basically curb that and try and curb it either through Sherman or Orrington, as well as for the outdoor cafe. And the outdoor cafe has to be far enough from Fountain Square where the basically the congregants are protected from some of the cigarette smoke. So basically, that's all that I had to say. I'm happy World of Beers is there. They have so far been a good neighbor, but they have been a winter neighbor. I'm not opposed to economic development. I've had several businesses in Evanston. I was named North Shore Businesswoman of the Year about sometime in the 90s. So I am aware of economic development and encouraging businesses. But I just wanted to make sure that we all were aware of all of the issues involved with having an outdoor cafe in that particular area, which is used by the community in all of Evanston. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very
Right.
much for your
Thank you.
comments. My understanding was that the outdoor cafe was going to be on the Orrington Avenue side,
Yes.
and that the Orrington Avenue entrance was the one that was going to be used. Is that correct?
That's what it says.
Is that right? Okay. And also,
She got that. Could you just tell her one more time? I don't think she heard you.
okay. Ms. Ruiz, it's the Orrington Avenue entrance that's going to be used for the location of the outdoor cafe, so that they're going to be coming in and out of the Orrington entrance. And also, while there may be smoking on the street allowed, you're not allowed to be outside, as far as I know, with an open container of...
An open container of alcohol, correct. Does that mean they'll be closing that entrance then?
I don't know.
Facing the Fountain Square?
I don't know.
I just have, as a citizen, I just have a problem walking into an establishment with all of our military honors directly in front, and it's become a personal issue for me, and I've been watching,
And Madam Chair, members of the committee, I think as the speaker mentioned, they have been a wonderful neighbor in the winter.
Yes.
And now that it's the summer, we will work with them so that they can be a wonderful neighbor in the
Thank
summer.
you. I just wanted to
But there absolutely are different issues.
Yes.
The weather is supposed to get warm at some point, and when it does,
Yes.
we'll work with them so that they understand the War Memorial. Smoke, that's a park, and so there are issues regarding...
Right, but thank you very much for the opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Okay, was there anyone else who wanted to speak on this issue? Okay. Okay, that's for action tonight. So all of those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. We're moving on to item P3, Ordinance 49013, granting major zoning relief for the elimination of required parking at 623 to 627 and a half Howard Street. Staff recommends adoption of Ordinance 49013, granting major zoning relief to eliminate 8 required off-street parking spaces for a Type 1 restaurant for a total of 0 off-street parking spaces. The proposal will allow for the redevelopment of a vacant commercial space and will not negatively impact adjacent properties since there is ample street parking and public and private parking lots. It's for introduction. Is there a motion?
I move approval. Second.
Okay. And any discussion?
Yeah.
Alderman
Madam
Rainey.
Chairman.
Mhm, sure.
The reason this is the parking spaces need to be removed is because in our analysis, the zoning analysis showed 8 garages behind the stores. I've watched this space for over 25 years, and there has never in history been a car parked in those garages. What was in those garages was storage for off-site convenience stores, like cases and cases of soda pop and chips and things like that, and also 2 car repair operations operated out of 2 of the garages. So while there's always need for parking, and this restaurant is not going to use those garages either for parking, the Zoning Board of Appeals asks that they be required to lease 8 parking spaces off-site. And they required it for 24 hours a day. We have on Howard Street within 2 blocks, I'm confused about one of them right now, but there are 5 vacant private parking lots that hold anywhere from 10 to 15 to 20 cars in that area. Those private lots can be leased at night by others. So I'm going to suggest that we alter this requirement and say 8 parking spaces must be leased, but they should be leased for the evening, like from 5 o'clock on, because during the day there's no need for this. And also the surrounding area, the residential area, a parking survey has just been mailed out to make it a City of Evanston parking sticker only area. So if anybody has a City of Evanston city sticker, they'll be able to park there. If not, they won't be. So it won't impact the neighborhood if these 8 spaces aren't secured during the daytime. Howard Street is virtually empty during the day because there's just nobody parking there. I can pull up there any time of the day and take any one of 3 or 4 spaces near any store. So I'm going to suggest that we do it in the evening, and I'm sure that they won't have a problem with that.
Okay, we have one person signed up to speak. Jeanette Ritzky, I'm sorry I didn't call you first.
It's not that I really haven't.
I need your name and
Jeanette Risky.
And your address.
2784 Sheridan. It's not that I have an issue with this, the peckish one or anything here, but what I have an issue with is the city is highly involved in many of these deals. This is an economic development project. The city's involved. Why isn't the zoning done first prior to the sale of the property? Because if the applicant bought the property and now is in a deal with the city seems obligated now to keep the deal going in whatever it does. So in a sense, the zoning process is somewhat violated because you don't have the opportunity to turn it down. So the city's really doing this process completely wrong in all these deals that you're creating because you have a financial interest. So I think it's something the city should start to think about as it goes forward, especially as we move to some other deals that I think are a lot more questionable than this one. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Rainey.
Well, we have a financial interest, but we already got their name on the dotted line, so not my problem if it doesn't get approved. And it's not my problem if it does get approved, because whatever we approve, they're going to have to comply with. We've got a lease from them, a lease to own. So, I mean, that's what we have. So I think that was a pretty clever thing that we got them to sign up before we decided whether or not to change the zoning. It's exactly the opposite of what you're suggesting. So anyway, 8 spaces are nothing in that area. It's a nice thing to make them do, but it's not really necessary. I don't want to overturn the whole ZBA, but I do think the evening is a good idea to have them lease 8 spaces in the evening.
Okay, Alderman Holmes.
Alderman Rainey, what does it have anything to do with the parking of the staff? Because in the report it talked about
The staff, right? Yeah.
should not be able to park on the street. So the requirement does it include?
But one of the things they were not aware of was all the available parking down there. It's not like the staff is going to take up parking of other people during the day. That's what my argument is. Yes, at night, the staff should be required to move their car, but in the daytime, I just see no reason for it. Because first of all, when you have a store open and there's no cars around, it's going to look like the store's not open. So, I mean, this is not going to be like in the downtown where you don't want the operators of the store to have all their associates parking in front of the store. But there's plenty of room down there for parking. And there's parking on both sides of the street. There's nothing going on the other side either. It's not a daytime
issue.
Okay, anybody else? Okay.
So I'm amending it.
All right, okay.
Require
So,
nighttime parking.
okay, so to require 8 parking spaces in the nighttime. Okay.
Whatever anybody, let staff
6
decide.
p.m. to midnight?
That's good, yeah, that's fine.
Okay, 6 p.m. to midnight. Okay, is everyone okay with that amendment? Okay, so we'll send it forward for introduction with that amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Moving on to P4, Ordinance 50013, amending various portions of the City Code in order to regulate vacation rentals as a type of B&B establishment. Staff requests consideration of Ordinance 50013, which would regulate vacation rentals as a subset of B&B establishments. Consequently, any vacation rental could operate only pursuant to a special use permit issued by the City Council after recommendation from the ZBA. It's for introduction this evening. There are 4 people signed up to speak on this. Could I have a motion, please?
Move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. So let's hear from the citizens. First, Kim Novi, then Maureen O'Donnell, Jenny Richards, and Mary Rosinski. If I could have your name and address, please.
Kim Novy, 2507 Ashland Avenue. Thank you for this ordinance. This seems to address most of our concerns. We feel that we've been heard. We appreciate this. The only thing I have to say is I still prefer to see it, and I think some of my other neighbors would, that it's owner-occupied at the time, because it's unlike a regular business. There isn't somebody who you can call if there is a water pipe break or whatever, anything like that. And then my final question, and at the risk of sounding ungrateful, I will ask again, what does that mean you will do with respect to 2515 Ashland and any other existing places that are acting as a B&B? That still remains my question. That's it. Thank you.
Maureen, are you here? Okay.
Hello, Alderman. I'm Maureen O'Donnell. I live at 2509 Ashland, and I also want to thank you for this thoughtful proposal, which seems to have some teeth. I am concerned about one part of it, and that, if I'm reading it correctly, it does permit rentals when the owner is not on the premises. My understanding of the situation on Dobson was that that was when the problems occurred. I recall the gentleman who testified here that he couldn't let his granddaughter in his backyard because partiers were urinating in the backyard of the non-owner occupied house that was rented on Dobson. His testimony, I'm sure you'll agree, about coming to America to improve his life, only to find himself living next to a nightmare, it was very compelling and heartrending. And I urge you to remember one thing. You've heard from perhaps 4 people engaging in these rentals, but over the course of 7 months, you've heard from dozens of people opposed to it. You've received a petition with 127 signatures opposed to this, and not one neighbor of these establishments has come to you to say they feel this is a good thing for Evanston. Again, I want to thank you for listening. This proposal is thoughtful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jenny Richards and then Mary Rosensky. Okay, and then Mary, there you are.
Hi, Mary Rosensky. I'm here from the National North Shore Board of Realtors, as well as a realtor, and I live in Evanston at 1729 Chancellor. And I understand why this ordinance, has affected neighbors and all. My concern is we had talked originally about excluding residents whose properties are for sale, and I feel concerned that we would be passing an ordinance which impacts every homeowner in this city at some point in their life to have to get a special use permit. It may be a little bit burdensome. So, I think the ordinance as presented is a step backwards. The ordinance prohibits all rentals, as if I understand this correctly, for a period of less than 30 days unless a property owner applies for a special use permit. And then situations which we had discussed at earlier meetings, such as a rent back to the original owner in the course of a sale or a neighbor of a vacant property while going under renovation, would be essentially prohibited. If that's correct, I would hope that before you pass an ordinance like this, you consider excluding those people, just because, the property taxes that come into this city due to sales, I don't think you want to put an additional burden on top of their transfer tax stamps that they're giving us and everything else. So please consider it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Was there anyone else who wants to speak on this issue? Okay. Well, then I'll open it up to discussion from the committee. Alderman Wilson.
Your point's well taken. I think there are at least a handful of exceptions that should probably be brought into this. I have a couple of other reservations as to how the proposed revisions are going to impact other aspects of the bed and breakfast ordinance. There was a lot of conversation in the past year about those limitations, and I think we've at least got a partial redrafting of the definition for the bed and breakfast. So I don't feel inclined to try to rewrite this tonight. My suggestion was going to be that we hold this in the committee for our staff to get us something that addresses these concerns. And I guess to the point that some of the neighbors have with regard to this use, somebody just has to apply for it and get it. So it doesn't preclude it in any way. It just requires the licensing. So I'll point that out to some of the neighbors. So I move that we hold in committee, that we have the staff come back and address the obvious exceptions that should probably be included, and to get some tie-in to the other definition provisions in our ordinance. There are cross references, and they don't match up. So we'll just need to clean that up.
Alderman Rainey?
I agree that it needs to be cleaned up. However, I don't agree that it should be held in committee. I think it should be introduced and returned to our committee. And we can work on it for as long as we want.
That's fine.
But I think it needs to get on the council agenda.
Okay. All right. No, that's good.
Okay. Mr. City Manager?
Yes. Perhaps we could talk just a moment about the obvious exceptions. I think we heard this evening those that are in contract for a real estate transaction, so that's clear. If the council could maybe mention any of the additional obvious exceptions so we don't miss them.
Alderman Nguyen?
Yes, I think that we heard about potentially renting to a neighbor whose home is damaged or is under repair, or needs some other shelter while they're out of their home for a period of time. I don't think that. I think we need to have an exception like that included. That's not the same thing as running a vacation rental.
Certainly.
And I'm trying to think if there were any others. I know we had some correspondence from the North Shore Board of Realtors, and I'm trying to remember what else is on there. But I do think these two in particular are important, and we should include them.
Alderman Rainey?
I think that there should be a process for requesting an exemption from the requirement. And it would be any of those kinds of things, and that our staff should be empowered to make those exceptions. I think it's very simple. I mean, there's all sorts of situations. Somebody's in a fire, we put them in an apartment that's vacant. All sorts of kinds of things that we can't even think of right off the top. And when they come to us, we'll say, well, of course we didn't mean that that's a vacation rental. So if we could just have a process whereby application could be made for an exemption by whoever wants to place the tenant in the space.
Alderman Nguyen?
Alderman Rainey, I think that's a good idea, but I think that because the seller rent back is so common, I think that we should. I would put that in the ordinance so that someone doesn't even have to take that step.
Well, but how are we going to know? How are the neighbors going to know that's what it is? I think we have to be notified that that's what's happening. It should be automatic, but just tell us.
Well, I think if it's the seller who's selling their own home and they decide to continue to live in it, I think the neighbors would know it was the same neighbor continuing to live there.
All right. In that case, you're right.
I mean, that's the one exception. I think if we could include that, then it saves an administrative step for something that is self-policing.
You're right. But there are other exceptions
we're
not going to even think of, and I don't even want to waste time thinking about them. But when they come up, if we give enough publicity to this issue, people like Mary Rosinski and others will know to contact our staff and say, look, this is not a vacation rental, it's a such and such.
So, Madam Chair, members of the committee, so I believe what I'm hearing then is that there would be an exemption in the ordinance for renting back a home that you have previously occupied and have now in the process of selling, and that any other exemption would have to be, again, I think for the record, some sort of compassion is the word that's coming to mind, but a hardship instance, and we could look for language along those lines and allow the city manager to make those exemptions. Is that what I think I'm hearing from the
Yes,
committee?
that's what I'm
Sure.
thinking.
So if it's the will of the committee, we'll, if you introduce that, we'll come back with language, have it returned to the committee. You can review the language in 2 weeks, and if that's all right, then we'll move forward to approval on the 28th, which will be a Tuesday meeting after Memorial Day.
Okay, everyone's good with that? Okay, let's have a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Okay, great. All right, moving on to P5, Ordinance 46013, amending the zoning ordinance to allow yard waste transfer facilities as special uses in the I3 district. The Plan Commission and City staff recommend approval of proposed ordinance 46013, amending the zoning ordinance to allow yard waste transfer facilities as special uses in the I3 General Industrial District. The P&D Committee held Ordinance 4603 in committee at its meeting of April 22nd, 2013, at the request of 9th Ward Alderman Colleen Burris, and that's for introduction.
Move approval.
Okay, we'll move it to discussion. Is there anyone who wanted to speak on that tonight? Okay, then discussion. Alderman Rainey.
I attended a meeting where there probably were 30-plus people, and lots of concerns, but the owner and operator were there. And I'm wondering if Alderman Burris wants to be told. Is she here? Where is she? Oh, there you are. What you need to tell us. I didn't see her there. Anyway, I thought it went swimmingly.
And what did the neighbors think?
The neighbors had explained to them the various restrictions by the Illinois Department of whatever. Go ahead.
Sure. Hi, Alderman Colleen Burris, 1312 Cleveland. Alderman Rainey and I hosted a meeting a week and a half ago with many of the neighbors from the 8th Ward as well as the 9th Ward. The owners of the property came out to talk to the residents. There was a lot of questions. We feel like we had our questions answered, and the concerns from the residents we can address through the special use permit, putting contingencies on the special use permit. So we feel comfortable at this time moving it on to council.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, any more discussion?
It was very reasonable. You know, I thought the meeting was going to be a little different than it turned out to be, but people were very thoughtful, and it was very impressive.
Well, the operators seemed very reasonable when they were here, so I'm glad to hear that worked out.
But the neighbors were too. I mean, there were some with serious concerns, but I mean, the concerns were allayed in many cases. Yeah. And the problem was, I think there was confusion that we were approving the yard waste station with a compost, and what we're really doing is we're approving a special use in the ordinance, not the actual use. Right. And that'll come by special use, and people felt comfortable that they would have another opportunity to speak.
Okay, so all of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Then P6, our last item for discussion tonight, or for consideration, is Resolution 31R13, 1890 Maple Avenue parking lease. The city manager requests authorization from the City Council to negotiate with Park Investment Properties, LLC, regarding a parking lease for 1890 Maple Avenue as provided by Resolution 31R13. It's for action. Is there a motion?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Discussion? Alderman Rainey.
Well, I don't want to discuss this particular case so much as to explain the background. Many years ago, when the research park was being created, the so-called research park, a developer named Charles Shaw was building buildings over there. And it was very expensive, as it is today, to build buildings with parking. And since at one time the area where you see the theater and the hotel and the bookstore and everything was the largest surface parking lot in the world, it was. And so what the council did back then was we said, oh, Charles, you don't have to put parking in, don't worry about it. We'll burden the tenants in your buildings and require the buildings to take out leases on various parking lots and structures if a structure ever gets built. And so that's what we did. We passed the research parking agreement, which was the developer didn't have to put in any parking, that eventually there would be parking. And they would have to lease spaces in wherever that parking was, if it was surface or whatever. And so that's how some of these buildings have these parking leases. You look at an office building and you think, why didn't that building have any parking? Because there certainly was no parking garage back then when those buildings were being built. So that's how these leases came to be. And they're all, this is a much newer lease than those leases back in the 80s. So, but in this case, when this project, as Alderman Holmes and I were discussing earlier, went before the Plan Commission and then the City Council for a plan development, and believe me, I didn't go back and read any of those minutes or anything, but the reason they went for a plan development was they're going to tear down the building and build parking in the building. Yet all this time, this lease has generated charges for parking that nobody ever used. And as a matter of fact, because the 80 spaces or whatever weren't used, other people got to park in them. So when you sit down with somebody and you explain to them the situation we find ourselves in, people go, well, I mean, it just sounds so ridiculous that we're going to charge somebody $300,000 for a parking lease, yes, that existed, but no parking was ever used, ever. So it's one of those common sense situations that I think we have to work our way out of. Now, that's the simpleton explanation, and I'm sure Alderman Wilson has a much more brilliant legalistic approach.
Well,
don't you?
I guess his light is not on.
I have a shorter.
That would be good. Well,
The
but
short version
I had
is
to cover 20-some years.
Right. The lease isn't in the packet, but there's nothing exciting or interesting in the lease other than the fact that the current owner of the property isn't the tenant. And to me, short version of this is we're not giving them anything because they don't owe us anything. So it's just cleaning up an old document that's floating around with a different tenant, and it doesn't apply to the current property. So it's that simple, in my opinion.
Okay, anyone else? Okay.
Well, I'll take another shot at it.
I think we're really ready to...
Well, wait, no, I think
okay.
we're not.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why.
Okay.
And the reason why is because what we're saying is we're going to let the city manager decide this, and to negotiate this, and I'm saying let's give him direction.
Well,
negotiate a zero fee.
I think that's the direction we're going.
Then
Madam
somebody
Chair,
has to put it in those words.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, as has been said, there is a lease on the property. Mr. Farrar and I have been concerned moving forward that unless there are specific findings made, really I think to support what Alderman Rainey has said, that we have some liability moving forward. And so my understanding with this direction is to craft a document that makes sure that both Mr. King and the City of Evanston are protected from any of those claims moving forward, that the property has this 2000 lease removed from it so that Mr. King can move forward with his project. That is my understanding of the authorization I'm requesting.
Could you explain what the liability is?
Well, I think that there are questions regarding the validity of the lease, and I think we want to settle them once and for all, that there is no additional obligation from Mr. King. So by having that done, there's no question later on that in some way this was a gift to public funds by the City of Evanston. So rather than leave that question in the air, we would like to settle it once and for all that it is not.
Okay. Alderman Nguyen.
Yes, along with Alderman Rainey, I was on the council at the time of this lease, and my memory of it is that we put these leases in place with the anticipation that there would be office buildings at these sites. And that was why the leases were there, for the tenants in office buildings. And that is not what Mr. King is planning to build, and he's planning to build something that includes parking. And so somehow this lease is still floating out there, but that was the intent of the lease was to provide office parking for buildings on those sites. And so in this instance, the use has changed. Parking is included with the plans for those buildings, and I don't think that there is an obligation to the city any longer under these circumstances for Mr. King. I mean, the use changed a long time ago.
And part of the document would be to clarify that, but also to clarify the time that there has been an office building that's been vacant.
That's right.
Alderman
But
Holmes.
it's been vacant, so the parking hasn't been used.
Alderman Holmes, then Alderman Wilson.
I just, are there, because I don't go back as far as Melissa and Ann, are there other properties?
Yes.
Yes.
That might be, then I think we should give the city manager directions to make sure we clear up all of those, because if this comes up again, we would want to make sure.
Well, those other buildings are not vacant.
Yeah, and they probably have people using
And they have
the
people
parking.
using the parking.
Oh,
So,
okay.
so
Regularly.
I think we actually have one of the other properties that has approached us, would like to make an amendment to the agreement, and so Mr. Farrar is working with legal counsel there. Again, we really believe that we can move forward here, clear the record so that there is no liability by Mr. King or for the city giving a gift of public funds for previous charges, real or imagined or any other way, and then clear the title moving forward. So that's the purpose of the agreement.
Okay, Alderman Wilson, and then.
And I think just so the city manager's office has clear direction, my understanding of my colleagues is that we're not asking for any money in exchange for the release. That's your understanding?
Right.
That is my
All
understanding.
right, just making sure we're clear. Okay.
Yes.
Madam Chair, Alderman Greg Rains from DLA Piper. We had prepared back in March and sent it to the Law Department a simple termination and release of the lease. I think it might be appropriate along the city manager's direction to just include a statement in that termination and release that the zoning has changed, the property is no longer, used as an office, and therefore, in consideration, the release it would be in place and the lease would go away, and that would kind of, I think, address everything that this committee is talking about tonight.
And Madam Chair, members of the committee, we have no problem with that. I think there is, though, a question regarding the years that the office building was kept vacant. And we want to make it clear that there is no gift of public funds by the city of Evanston for not having collected what may or may not have been rent under that lease. We want to make sure that that's perfectly clear so that there's no questions of Mr. King, no questions of the city council moving forward. So I think we'll handle the past, we'll handle the future, and be able to move forward and allow Mr. King to build his building.
Okay, my concerns, and as I spoke with the city manager last week, were that we're not talking about dedicated parking spaces that no one else could use during this period. There were people parking in these parking spaces, so the city is not out any money. And perhaps in the best of all possible worlds, we should have been following up year by year to find out what was owed and maybe clearing this up before now, but I'm sure we'll do better in the future on that.
And Madam Chair, members of the committee, Mr. Farrar, and I want to thank Alderman Wilson, who was very helpful as we've looked at these documents, really to ascertain what the appropriate legal position of the city is. And again, we feel very comfortable what's being recommended this evening.
Okay, thank you very much. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Mr. City Manager, are there any items for discussion?
No, ma'am.
Are there any communications?
No, ma'am.
Then is there a motion to adjourn?
Can I ask a
Oh, I'm sorry.
So when will this, when will we, does it have to come back?
No.
Oh, so, but what is
It's
the
just-
timeline for getting it done? Because I thought Mr. King wanted to start his property as soon as possible, so do you
I
have
believe
an idea?
Mr. King's counsel and Mr. Farrar have been in communication. As soon as they come up with an agreement that meets the satisfaction of both parties, will be executed and move forward.
Fantastic.
This matter is supposed to be up for action tonight, so, we're happy to try to add a few sentences in if that works, but I understand that that's also tonight, so.
I would anticipate over the next several days.
Okay, fantastic.
Thank you.
Okay.
We voted.
What, I need a, yeah, we're voting on a motion to adjourn. No, we're finished.
Voted on that.
Yeah, we did vote on that. So is there a second to adjourn, please? Second. Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you very much.